Okay, so we didn't have a break. Before the break that we didn't have, um, we were talking about transcriptomics and proteomics. Um, and those those can be very useful technologies. Um, but sometimes they hide things from you. And the reason for that is that if you imagine um, any tissue. In this case, we're going to use a brain because these images have come from a colleague who is a neuroscientist, but you can imagine that this could be um, uh, any tissue in an organism that you're looking at. It's not going to be homogeneous. They're often very heterogeneous. They're often made of multiple different cell types. Um, And even if you're looking at this and you're thinking, well, that's obviously a brain and I work on a single-celled parasite, even with parasites, they're often more heterogeneous than you think they are. So particularly with protozoa, because they have very distinct, distinctly morphological life cycles changes with lots of transcriptional changes. Um, if you take a flask with some parasites growing in culture, it's likely that they're not all going to be the same. They're not going to be conducting biological functions at the same time. They may be replicating asynchronously, they may be differentiating asynchronously. So this is relevant even if you're working with single-celled organisms in culture. But it becomes even more relevant if you're working with things like biopsy samples or blood samples or anything like that, where you have multiple different cell types, potentially from the host and the parasite involved in them. And the problem with this is if you take your heterogeneous tissue sample and do a standard bulk RNA-seq experiment with it, what you're doing is you're taking this sample, you're breaking it up into a big mush like this, and then you're sequencing that mush. And then you're trying to take this pile of cells that you've sequenced from one tissue and compare it to a different pile of cells that you've sequenced from potentially the same tissue under different conditions and compare them. And that's actually quite a difficult thing to do. So you can see here that, for example, there's quite a few green cells. You'll probably get a very strong signal from them and probably from the blue cells as well. There's a tiny few number of pink cells hidden in here. Would you see a signal from those in this data? I think not. It would be very hard to figure out exactly what's going on. So when you're doing bulk like this, it can be very useful for things like saying, I want to compare ring stage parasites to trophozoite stage parasites because you can separate those out nicely and ask how they're different. But if you've got a mixed population, it's very difficult to find signals in it. So single cell aims to try and address this by allowing you to associate transcriptional signals with individual cells. So rather than sequencing a big mush of tissues of cells like this as a big pool, what it enables you to do is this: sort your cells out into different types and then look at what's happening in each of those different types individually. And so, for example, that means that in this situation, you wouldn't necessarily lose the signal from this small amount of purple cells. You can see what's different between these light green cells and these dark green cells. You can start asking as well if the abundance of different numbers of cells, of different types of cells changes. So if I were to compare two samples, are there more or less purple cells in one sample than the other sample? Um, and that can enable us to answer questions that are just not possible to ask when you're sequencing a big pool of heterogeneous cells together. So by itself, that's really helpful. But single cell enables us also enables us to take that a bit further in different ways. So one thing that you may have heard about is spatial transcriptomics. And what that enables us to do is then to reconstruct these cells back into their spatial orientation. So that enables us to then know that this purple set of cells had a distinct signal coming from them, but we can also know where they are in our larger tissue and what other types of cells they're interacting with. And this is a really helpful technology for exploring host parasite or vector parasite interactions. At the moment on VEuPathDB, we don't have capacity for spatial transcriptomics. We do have single cell, and we'll get to that in a second. But the other sort of add-on analysis for single cell that's really helpful is what we call trajectory inference. And what that enables us to do is to order our cells based on incremental transcriptional changes. So here we can basically say that these dark pink cells are very slightly different to these light pink cells, and those are very slightly different to these purpley cells, which are very slightly different to these blue cells. So we can assign an order to them, and we can look at things that happen as cells move from one state to another. And this is what we're going to be looking at in the data set we'll be looking at in this exercise. So in parasitology, this is particularly useful for two things. So one is for examining processes that can't be synchronized. If you can't synchronize something, you're never going to be able to sequence discrete populations. So you normally have to look at something heterogeneous, and this can be a very useful way of doing that. But it's also very useful for looking at differentiation. And so something that's been quite long-standing in parasitology is that we know what different distinct morphological stages of a life cycle look like and how those are different, but we don't necessarily know how parasites get from one to the other. And that's because querying what happens between the two is quite different. And that's a question that this kind of analysis enables us to get at. So you can imagine that we have known trophozoites at this end and known whatever the next stage is at that end. And these are representing all the cells that are partially differentiated as you move from one to the other. So how does this work? There are numerous platforms for doing this now, but 10x is probably still the most popular, so it's the one I'm going to talk about. So with 10x, you have a microfluidic system, and that you can feed things into that through 3 different channels. So into the first channel, you feed gel beads, and those are coated with barcodes. Into the next channel, you feed your cells. And into the channel after that, you're feeding oil. So the buffer that's going in the first part is an aqueous buffer. And so when you feed the oil in, I think most people know what happens when you put oil into water, you get droplets. So what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to regulate the speed at which the beads go in and the speed at which the cells go in and the speed at which the oil go in, such that you end up with droplets which each contain 1 bead and hopefully 1 cell. You'll see here that in this diagram, some of the beads have no cells in, and that's okay. We normally aim to put the cells into the speed where we only ever get 1 cell per bead, and we never get 2 cells per bead. But that means that inevitably we are going to get some empty ones. Each of the beads is coated with 10x barcodes. And those contain 3 things. So one of them is an oligo DT, and that enables us to grab the poly A tail of transcripts that the cell is making. We also then have a unique molecular identifier, and that is unique to every barcode on this cell. So every barcode has a different unique molecular identifier. And then there's a cell barcode. So on 1 bead, all of the oligos have the same cell barcode. So the cell barcode is the bit that allows us to say that this cell was associated with this bead, and therefore every transcript from this cell will have the same blue cell barcode. There's some magic that happens that I'm not going to go into, which enables us to basically start the library preparation process in the beads so that each cell only gets its own barcode. And once the barcodes are fully attached, then we remove the oil and pull all the samples, and now we have a sample where we have RNA from lots of different cells, but we've got the barcode, so we can track back and understand which cell each individual piece of RNA came from. And then that's what we sequence. So I'll talk a little bit more about the experiment in a minute. Oh, sorry, yeah. So yeah, this is just what this barcode looks like in a little bit more detail. So we've got the oligo DT here. We've got our unique molecular identifier. This is the cell barcode. So every every oligo on this green bead is going to have this same cell barcode, and then this is the primer that's used for priming the sequencing reaction. So as we sequence, we're going to capture all of these things, the barcode, the UMI, and then the transcript. So the data set we're going to look at in the exercise was using this kind of analysis. This is trajectory inference. And just for those of you, because it will make a lot more sense if you know what the data set is, for those of you who are not familiar with Trypanosoma brucei, I just quickly wanted to talk about the biological problem here. So this is a differentiation question. In the mammalian host, Trypanosoma brucei has two main forms. It has this form that's called the slender form because it's long and thin. When you're infected with Trypanosoma brucei, it very quickly differentiates to this form, and then this form replicates. So this is the form that is in your blood and replicating like crazy and making you sick. That form, however, cannot be transmitted again. So if the parasite wants to be transmitted again, it needs to differentiate, and it differentiates into this form up here, which is called the stumpy form because it's more short and squat. That form can no longer replicate, but it can be transmitted, so it can be taken up in a blood meal by the next tsetse fly that bites you. So this is really important that cells can get to stumpy form, but if there is no blood meal taken, this is a dead end because cells cannot replicate in this form and they can't go backwards either. So for a long time, we knew that there was some form of quorum sensing happening to get from slenders to stumpies. We knew that if the population density got to a certain point, they would differentiate. And we also knew that if you put certain supplements in the media, it would force differentiation, but we didn't actually know what the signal was. And so the experiment you're going to look at was about trying to elucidate what that signal was. So rather than taking a population of slenders and a population of stumpies and doing a differential expression between them, which is what you might do with bulk RNA-seq, what this group did was they took a single population of asynchronously differentiating parasites so that we captured all of the intermediate stages between those two things. And that's what they were looking at in the experiment that you're going to look at in VEuPathDB in a minute. Very quickly, if you go to any gene page, you can see the experiments. This thing is called a UMAP, and I'll just show you a bigger version of this where it's easier to see what's happening. But effectively on this, darker colors mean the cells are this gene is more expressed. So you can see that it's expressed in these cells, but not in these cells over here. There's some links below, and you can get to these from other places as well that take you to an app that is outside of this. Outside, it was owned by us, but it's not integrated fully into the sites. And this gives you an interactive version of this that you can play with in a lot more detail. So just to orientate everyone, in these, every dot represents a cell. These plots don't really have axes, or at least not axes that are meaningful, but what they're trying to do is put cells that are transcriptionally similar close to each other. So we can say that this group of cells over here are all going to be quite similar to each other. This group are going to be similar to each other, and this group are going to be similar to each other. And then this app allows you to explore that in different ways, which is what we're going to look at in the exercises. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to cover. A little bit about what single cell sequencing is and why we use it, a little bit of orientation about the data set you're going to look at, and then a very quick look at a very quick explanation of what this plot in this app is showing you. And I think everything from there we can take into the exercises, unless Omar or
Yeah,
anyone else wants
there's
to add anything.
nothing to add. There's a question from Anna Souza about whether the barcode actually you can trace back um, to the origin cell, basically. In other words, uh, can you really trace uniquely each cell with a unique identifier? Uh,
So yeah, for the most part, yes. So when you get, let me go back to my slides. When you get these kits from 10x, they guarantee that every bead in their kit has a different barcode on it. And therefore, if this fluidics part is working correctly and you genuinely have one cell with one bead, then every transcript from that cell will have the uh, barcode from that bead, and no other cells should have that. The caveat to that is that this process, it's a bit like doing cloning by limiting dilution. So you're basically trying to hit that peak um, concentration where you're getting individual cells. Sometimes you're getting no cells, but sometimes just by chance, you're going to get two cells together. And in that case, you're going to end up with one bead associated with two or maybe three cells, and all of the transcripts from all three of those cells will have the same barcode on them. And we have ways to try and filter those out of the data because computationally, that's going to look like one cell that's transcribing three times as much. And we can normally spot that and filter those out, but it's not a perfect process. So it's generally pretty good, but yeah, you're correct that it's absolutely not perfect.
cool.
Were there
Okay,
any other
so
questions?
there
Yeah,
weren't any
okay.
more questions in the chat as far as I can tell. And would suggest that maybe we should go to breakout rooms and get started since we are running late. So let's spend half an hour. We have about half an hour for this exercise. It's a bit rushed, but again, the goal is for you to just get started looking at the single cell data. We do have more YouTube tutorials that describe this in a bit more detail. And of course, the resources are available, so you can always go in and play around with it yourselves. And I definitely encourage you to do so offline and then ask us any questions. So I'll go ahead and open the room. So we'll go for half an hour. And then in half an hour, we will come back and we will take probably a short stretching break and then transition to the orthology section. All right, rooms are open now.